This will be part 2 of my backyard orchard tour. I'll pick up here in this area where I left off in part 1. First up will be these persimmon trees you see here. The coffee cake in the front started to leaf out in late February. Then in early April it started to develop flower buds, and by late April it began to bloom. The chocolate on the right began to leaf out in early March and started to develop buds by early April and was in bloom by late April. The fuyu over on the back left didn't start to leaf out until mid-March, and it started to develop flower buds towards the end of April. Of all these persimmons, the coffee cake in the front here was the first one that started to bloom, and it put out a pretty decent amount of blooms, and it's also the one that's put on the most growth of all of these here. You can see it's put on quite a bit of growth compared to the other ones. There's several clusters of flower buds on most of the branches. There's also a few that appear to be developing some persimmons, but it's still way too early to tell if these are going to reach full maturity. Another good group up here, and this other branch has quite a few as well. The chocolate also has a good amount, and there's still some flowers in bloom. The coffee cake persimmon already ended its bloom cycle, so I'm not sure how many of these on the chocolate are going to be pollinated. It requires cross-pollination, so who knows how many of those will be pollinated. The fuyu here, on the other hand, doesn't require a pollinator, and it was the last one to start developing flower buds, and it's just barely starting to flower. And over here are my mangoes. I have 3 varieties growing. 2 of them have developed flower buds, but this one here that's on the right is my cherry mango, which is not doing all that well. It hasn't put on much growth. I went ahead and I pruned the leader branch in the hopes of trying to encourage some side branching, but still nothing off of it yet. And this one here is my coconut cream mango. This one has a few large flower bud clusters that have formed. There's several branches that have them, and over here is my Glen mango. It has a couple of small bunches as well. And it's also pushed out some new growth, as you can see here. And here in this group, this first one here, this is my Pitomba, and it's putting out new growth here. These will probably develop into flower buds. It's still the early stages. Hard to tell if it's going to be flower buds or it's pushing out leaf, but I do believe those are going to be those are some flower buds that are starting to form. Has several scattered throughout the majority of the branches. And over in the back left there is my ice cream bean tree that has put on a lot of growth. I've had to prune this back several times already. Still haven't got any fruit off of it. It's been in the ground for just over a year. Same as this Grumichama. It's been in the ground. They were both planted, all three of these were planted about the same time. So they've been in the ground for about a year, but no fruit off of this one either. It's put on good growth as well, but hasn't set any fruit yet. And here are my fig cuttings that I started in late December, early January. I took these cuttings off of these figs that I have growing here. There's three different varieties. There's a Peter's honey, Excel fig, and a blackjack fig. And the Peter's honey are starting to develop some figs on them. I'm going to go ahead and take them all off. I'm not going to let these small trees put any fruit on this year. I'll wait till next year before I let them fruit. And here's my hog plum, which is still dormant. This tree, as well as one of my pear trees, pineapple pear variety, are the only deciduous trees that I have that are still dormant. I also have a hood pear tree that is just starting to wake up. I'll show you those in a few. And here are my cherry trees. That's a mini royal on the left and a Royal Lee cherry tree on the right. The mini royal began to bloom in early May, and the Royal Lee bloomed shortly after that. These varieties require cross-pollination. Last season, they didn't bloom as close to one another as they did this season, so there was very little cross-pollination, and each of these trees only produced a single cherry. This season, since they bloomed a little closer to one another, there's a few more that were produced, but not a lot. That was the only bunch for the mini royal. The Royal Lee produced a few more, but not by much. Hopefully the cross-pollination will improve next season. There's several scattered throughout the tree. They're a bit hard to see, but There's not a whole lot of them in there. I'm gonna guess between both trees I'll be lucky if I get 30 out of here. There's these here that are just barely starting to come on. I recently picked a couple of cherries off these trees. They were both good size and they had excellent flavor. I'm hoping as the years go by, these trees will be able to sync their blooming cycles and I'll be able to get a bigger crop off of them. I'm also considering taking advice from a YouTube viewer, and I may decide to graft a different variety to try and increase the fruit yield. And here's my little Miss Figgy fig tree growing in this 15-gallon container. It just came out of dormancy in early March and still no fruit development on this one. And here are my stone fruit trees that have some have put on a pretty good amount of fruit and quite a bit of growth as well. I'd like to maintain all my stone fruit trees at a height of about 8 feet. And several of these trees here are significantly taller than that, so I'm gonna have to do some pruning. This 4-on-1 peach tree here is gonna need some heavy pruning because there's 2 grafts on here that are taking over, and they're gonna have to be cut back significantly so that the others can catch up. But it did manage to produce a heavy crop. I should have thinned it back quite a bit more than what I did. Fruit's pretty small on there, so should have done a better job. This one here is just barely starting to develop some fruit. I did thin this one out quite a bit more than the other, so hopefully the fruit on this one will be good size. This other one here was the last one of this group to bloom. It still has a small amount of blooms on there, but no fruit development yet. And this group here are my nectarine trees. I have 2 nectarine and one, there's a Nectaplum that's on the other side in the front there. This one here still has a few blooms on it. There's a few scattered throughout the tree. And it's just starting to develop a small amount of fruit. Here's one that just started to form recently. There's another one here. I'm gonna have to prune this nectarine tree back because it's blocking this other nectarine tree that I have growing here on the other side here. And it's also starting to develop a small amount of fruit. I'll go ahead and pause the video here and move to the front so you can see get a better view of the Nectaplum. And this is my spicy Nectaplum, which is managed to set a pretty good amount of fruit. It has quite a bit of a heavy crop that developed, and it also put on quite a bit of growth. This is one that's definitely going to have to be pruned down quite a bit. And this last group here are my Apricot and Aprium. I have two apricot trees growing in the back, and that's an Aprium in the front, which has put on quite a bit of growth. None of these trees have set large amounts of fruit. They were the last to bloom of all my stone fruit trees and didn't bloom until late March. This one here that's on the right is a Katy apricot, and nothing has formed on that one so far. The Blenheim that's here in the back, that one has a few that have started to develop, and the Aprium also has a few on it, but so far not that many that have formed on there. And here is a 4-on-1 peach tree that is growing in this 20-gallon container. This is another one that I didn't do a good job of thinning. I had to prop up a couple of the branches that I was afraid they might snap because there was too much fruit on there, so it was getting a bit heavy. Next season I'll have to do a much better job of thinning these trees out. You can see here the fruit is pretty small. I've already harvested a few of these and it has excellent flavor, but the fruit is a little on the small side. And here are my pink Barbie guavas. There's two trees growing here, and both of them are developing quite a bit flower buds. These trees put on a good amount of fruit last season, and I'm certain this season's not going to be any different. There's quite a few flower buds on both the trees. And here's my Eureka lemon tree. This one's put on quite a bit of growth since it was planted here a little over a year ago. It formed several flower buds, and there's a few of them that are looks like they're starting to set. And here's my Cara orange tree. This one has been in the ground just over a year as well. It recently put on a heavy set of blooms, and there were quite a few oranges that were starting to develop, but it lost the majority of them, and there's only a few left. And here's my Morel blood orange. This one has put on a good amount of growth. It's got quite a few leaves that are coming out, but so far no flower buds have formed on this one. The same for this one here, my Satsuma mandarin. It has quite a bit of growth, but there's no flower buds that have formed on this one either. And these are my grapefruit trees. That's this one here is a real red grapefruit that is put on a good amount of growth. And this other one here is the Oro Blanco grapefruit. Hasn't put on as much growth as the other one. And no flower buds on either of these. And here's my ice cream banana. The flower bud on this one started to emerge sometime around mid-December. And it looks like some of the bananas are starting to turn color, so hopefully it won't be too much longer before these bananas are ready to pick. And here's my Meyer lemon tree that I have growing in this 22-inch container. This one is a steady producer, and once again it's put on a pretty good amount of fruit. As you can see here, it's got quite a bit of lemons that are starting to develop. There's quite a few on several of the branches, so it should wind up with a pretty good crop off of this one this season. And here's my Dorsett golden apple tree. This one started to bloom in February, and we wound up setting quite a few apples on it. They're still not ready to pick, but hopefully it won't be too much longer before I can start to harvest some of these. And here are my pear trees. The hood pear on the right just recently started to leaf out. This other one is a pineapple pear, and it's still dormant. And here are my red lady dwarf papayas. These are supposed to be self-pollinating, and I've had them flower before, but I've never had any fruit set off of any of these. And here are two other guavas that I have growing in containers. That's a Hawaiian white guava on the right, and an unknown variety that I grew from seed on the left. Neither of these have any flower buds forming yet. And here are my honeyberry plants that I recently purchased. Both of these are doing really well. This one on the right here is a Blue Moon variety, and it's put on quite a bit of new growth since being transplanted into this 2-gallon grow bag. This other one here is a Tundra variety, and it's also putting on a small amount of new growth. But they're both doing excellent. And here's my Mexicola avocado. Fruit on this one has put quite a bit more size since my last video. This one here this tree started to bloom in late January. And it doesn't take too long unlike my Hass avocado that I have growing, the fruit on this one tends to ripen much quicker. I'm hoping these will be ready to pick sometime around June or July. And here are my blackberry plants. I'm not sure what variety these two here on the end are. I'll put the name on the screen. This one here, it just recently started to flower. And this one here is just barely starting to form leaves. The plant you see here in the back, this is actually a branch that rooted from the other tree here, or from this plant right here. Branch that just started to root, so I just left it. This one here is a baby cakes variety. And although this is the smallest plant, it is a heavy producer. And here's my cherry of the Rio Grande. It started to flower late February. I've been harvesting a few of these, a few at a time each morning, and still has a small amount left on the tree. Didn't produce that many, but last season this tree flowered twice. The first set of blooms came in late January or early February, and then again in late July or early August. So hopefully it'll do the same again this year, and in a few months hopefully it'll set a second set of blooms. And here is my Celeste fig tree. This one came out of dormancy in late February, and it started to develop figs in late April. This tree has been growing in this container for about 4 years, and it is a steady producer. It usually puts on a good amount of figs, and it looks like it's gonna have another good crop this season. Well, that'll be it for now. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to click on the like button. And as always, stay safe, grow your own, and thank you for watching.